weapons are being used.
David Martin at the Pentagon. We go to CBS News White House correspondent Scott Pelley at the White House. Scott, I understand the President's about to address the nation.
That's right, Dan. We expect the President to be here in the briefing room a little bit over 10 minutes from now. The White House has not officially commented on these reports that the attacks are underway, but we expect the President to do just that in about 10 minutes from the briefing room. The President has had a busy morning on all of this so far. He met with his national security team about 9 o'clock this morning, and then later had about a 35-minute telephone call with Boris Yeltsin, the President of Russia. As you know, Yeltsin is dead set against these air attacks. They had what we are told was a passionate discussion over the issue, but the President told Yeltsin that NATO and the United States was prepared to go ahead. We expect to hear from the President himself in about 10 minutes. Dan?
Scott Pelley at the White House. We go live to NATO headquarters in Brussels, where Javier Solano, the head of NATO, is now speaking.
And has refused to negotiate in good faith. The time has now come for action. Let me reiterate, NATO is not waging war against Yugoslavia. We have no quarrel with the people of Yugoslavia, who for too long have been isolated in Europe because of the policies of their government. Our actions are directed against the repressive policy of the Yugoslav leadership. We must stop the violence and bring an end to the humanitarian catastrophe now taking place in Kosovo. We have a moral duty to do so. NATO's men and women in uniform who are carrying out this important mission are among the best in the world. I'm confident that they will be successful.
We go back to David Martin at the Pentagon. David?
To confirm now, the U.S. has launched cruise missiles, both from B-52 bombers, those are cruise missiles which carry 2,000-pound warheads, and from ships, those cruise missiles carry 1,000-pound warheads. Those are going to be followed very shortly by B-2 stealth bombers, which can drop, each one of them can drop 16 2,000-pound bombs. Those planes took off last night from Whiteman Air Force Base in the United States in Missouri and have flown overnight to their targets. And then depending on weather, the F-117 stealth fighter that we have seen so much of in Iraq will also be dropping bombs, but they require clear weather because they designate their target using a laser beam which cannot go through clouds. But the U.S. is right now in the process of firing somewhere in the neighborhood of tens of cruise missiles, I'm told, in this initial wave. Plus, it will be, no doubt, tens of bombs as soon as the stealth aircraft arrive.
David Martin at the Pentagon. We turn now to General Buster Glosson, our CBS News military consultant. General Glosson, last night on the CBS Evening News, you talked in terms of an expectation that the plan would be for bombing of several weeks. Now today, from various international sources, we're hearing that no, perhaps a matter of days is more likely. Put that in perspective for us.
Well, it's very significant, especially when you think of the type of impact that we continue to hear, that being degrade or have minimum overall impact on the Serbian forces doing the burning of the villages and killing the ethnic Albanians. And a 2 or 3 day attack, to say that it's going to be significant, I think is almost a gross overstatement, because it's just not going to happen.
Well, give me very quickly the upside and the downside of a few days attack as opposed to a sustained attack of weeks, nearing a month.
Well, a few days attack, you're going to temporarily disrupt their communication some. You're going to destroy a few supplies that the Serbian army, and you're going to cause the Serbian army to pull back and move things around and wait you out. If you go for 2 or 3 or 4 weeks, especially when you consider the rough terrain and the bad weather that we're going to be dealing with also, then you have a chance to make an impact, and you have, a sustained impact, an impact that it would take quite a a period of time to recover from, not something that you could just kind of wait it out and say, well, this will be over shortly. And we have the opportunity here, if we only go 2 or 3 days, or probability of, in all honesty, alienating the Serb army, and they'll even be more ferocious with their atrocities and so forth.
Well, you're retired military, but as a military person, if you were planning in the Pentagon and you first were told to plan for weeks of bombing and then were told it's going to go 3 or 4 days, I can't believe that any military planner would be pleased about that, but you tell me.
No, you're right. They wouldn't be pleased about that, but when it's all said and done, you follow the guidance and direction of the president. And so if they're told to go 2 or 3 days, that's what they'll do, and they'll do the best they can. If they're told to go further, they're postured to do that, and they will not have a problem doing that.
General Buster Glosson, our CBS News military expert and consultant. We go back to Alan Pizzi in Pristina, the capital of Kosovo. Alan?
Dan, I've heard a couple of more bangs, but they were well off in the distance. I can hear also a distant air raid siren, a long, sustained wail. We've got a camera pointed toward the southeast where we know that there's a couple of barracks and airfield and a kind of a radar communication station up on a hill. And right at the end of the lens, we picked up what looked like something burning. But here in central Pristina, there's no sign of anything really going on. A couple of people are still on the streets. The occasional car, even saw a bus go by, and the lights are still on. So if they're doing something in Kosovo, it's certainly not that close to Pristina. I felt no concussions. There's not the sharp crack that you get when you're relatively close to a large explosion. It's a distant, booming kind of bang. So that tells me that it's quite a few miles from downtown Pristina. I would think that they would want to be very careful about not getting any civilians. And there are lots of little villages scattered around Pristina, although the Yugoslavs, having been ex-communists, they do tend to put very large perimeters all around. And the lights have just...
Alan Pizzi, are you there? Alan Pizzi, are you there? Alan Pizzi, live from Pristina, was just in the process of saying that the lights were beginning to flicker, and then he went completely off the air, and the cell phone, the satellite phone which he's operating, we're told, is now dead. We'll be making an effort to reestablish contact with Alan Pizzi, who is working in a very tough and dangerous neighborhood that just today got a whole lot tougher and more dangerous with the beginning of the U.S.-led NATO airstrikes. Let's pause for 1 second before we go back to David Martin at the Pentagon and put a frame around what's happening, because no American should be mistaken. A lot of Americans' lives are now in danger as they fly these missions. Yes, a lot of missiles are involved, but there are also a lot of our sons and daughters in those cockpits. We don't forget that. Let's go back to David Martin at the Pentagon.
Dan, that's one thing that Pentagon officials have been saying for a number of days now. We're not in Iraq anymore. This is an entirely different situation in which the terrain is bad, the weather is bad, and the air defenses are good. And in these initial phases, when cruise missiles and stealth aircraft are being used, there is a relatively low danger to losing pilots. But the way this campaign is structured, that once the air defense network for the entire country has been disabled, which is the object of the attacks that are going on now, to take out air defense centers, take out command centers, degrade the ability of the leaders in Belgrade to communicate with their forces in the field. Once that has been accomplished, then if Milosevic still has not yielded to pulling his troops back and accepting a international NATO peacekeeping force, then planes are going to start going after the Serb army in and around Kosovo. Those are going to be tactical aircraft. They're not going to be stealth. They're going to be vulnerable to ground fire. And the Air Force, at least, has run one computer simulation of what would happen, and that computer simulation found that they would lose a dozen aircraft. Now, you have to add the caution that before Desert Fox, the last bombing campaign against Iraq, computer simulations estimated that they would lose as many as 10 aircraft, and they did not lose any. So 12 may indeed turn out to be a worst case, but there is danger.
David Martin at the Pentagon. CBS News veteran foreign correspondent Mark Phillips is on the telephone now from Belgrade, Yugoslavia, the capital of Serbia. Mark? Mark Phillips, calling Mark Phillips to come in from Belgrade. Well, you'd established, Mark, are you hearing us?
In Belgrade, where two flashes have been seen here, two explosions, but some distance away from the center of Belgrade. Impossible to estimate just what distance. There are military installations, as we know, ringing Belgrade, and there were two distinct flashes, not close enough to make any kind of an impact. We're now getting air raid sirens, if you can hear that. Air raid sirens have just begun to ring out for the first time today in Belgrade. This comes about 10 or 15 minutes after the flashes were seen off in the very distance of town. So far, just two flashes heard, or seen rather, here. No real large explosions heard, but clearly the Serb air defense authorities are concerned now. Air raid sirens running over as I speak. I can also tell you that there's nothing like a blackout or anything over Belgrade tonight. The town is lit up brightly. Every light that can be lit appears to be lit on streets, in buildings, advertising signs. Belgrade is a big, bright target tonight, and the Serbian authorities apparently believe it's one that's about to be hit again. Do you hear me, Dan?
Mark Phillips, we do hear you. Mark, you've seen and heard two what you consider to be major explosions in, let's say, the north, the west, the south part of outside Belgrade?
Trying to get our bearings here, they appear to be south, and as I said earlier, some distance away, miles away from the center of Belgrade. The flashes so far that they were seen but not heard here, the sound not even carrying right into the center of town where I'm standing. The air raid sirens have now gone quiet, but there's still traffic in the streets, and as I mentioned a short time ago, nothing in the way of a blackout or anything that would indicate that the Serbs are trying to make themselves hard to see at this point. But it's an ominous sensation hanging over Belgrade at this point.
Mark Phillips reporting live from Belgrade in Serbia. Alan Pizzi, who is in Pristina, the capital of Kosovo. We think we're back in telephone contact with him. We're told that Pristina is now completely blacked out. Alan, are you there? CBS News New York calling Alan Pizzi in Pristina, Kosovo. We seem to have lost it. The word for the moment is gone. That in Pristina, the report earlier, though, just a few minutes ago, if not indeed seconds ago, was that it was blacked out. Unclear whether it had been blacked out by the local Serbian police and military who are in charge there, or whether something had been hit that blacked it out, knocked out the electrical system. You heard Mark Phillips live from Belgrade saying that Belgrade was lit up like your average football field. All lights were on there. The important points at the moment, the attack against Serbian forces both inside Kosovo and inside Serbia itself. These attacks have begun. They include attacks on the outskirts of Belgrade itself. These attacks are expected to continue at least for a few days. It's unclear, given today's developments, whether it will be limited to a few days of strikes or whether, as was the original plan, according to all reports, be sustained bombing for weeks. That we'll just simply wait and see. We're waiting at the moment for the appearance of the President of the United States. A diplomatic sequence was worked out here. First, the head of NATO was allowed to make the original announcement. That's what we carried live for you earlier from NATO headquarters in Brussels, giving the multi-nation official announcement that the attacks were underway. Now, the President of the United States will address the people of the United States. Earlier today, the President said that what this was about was stopping what he called destructive racial, ethnic, religious, and cultural aggression. Now here's the President.
Good afternoon.